All right. Well, let's get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're talking today about how to not waste money on Google Ads. I am Mark Kleinman. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Rater8. I think many of you know Rater8 already or work with us already, but for those that don't, we help medical practices with online reputation management, which is not what we're talking about today. We're talking about advertising. Which is why we've asked Bryan Cush to join us and lead the discussion today. He's the co-founder and CEO of Tidal Health Group. So he's really got the deep expertise on Google advertising and related topics that I think you all want to hear about today. With that said, I will mostly turn this discussion over to Bryan to walk you through some of the basics and even some more advanced topics. And then I'll probably jump in with a few questions. If you guys have questions, please do add it to the chat or Q&A at the bottom of your screens, and I'll be sure to filter those to Bryan along the way. And we'll try to reserve a few minutes at the end just dedicated to the Q&A portion. We only have 30 minutes today, so we're going to try to squeeze a lot into that time. And with that said, Bryan, thanks for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the introduction. Thank you, Mark, and thank the Rater8 team for the opportunity as well. I appreciate everyone joining us. It's a cold and rainy day here in New York, so hopefully it's a little bit more fun than the weather. I appreciate there's a good range of people on the webinar as well. I've seen from administrators, marketers, doctors. So I'm going to zoom in and out, I'd say, of some kind of very high level landscape around Google Ads down to some really advanced level. So I hope I kind of bring information that's useful across the board, but certainly don't hesitate to submit your questions. I know Mark's going to do a great job moderating. Might even interrupt me if it's something really pointed on what we are discussing, or at a minimum, try and stack them at the end, and we try and address any questions as we go. Just a little bit about myself. I'm one of the co-founders at Tidal Health Group. Just like Rater8, we are healthcare exclusive. I'd say we look at the landscape of digital marketing as every other touch point outside of reputation, we try and support, and that heavily is around paid advertising and particularly Google Ads. And we've been in the space a little over a decade as well. Just really high level agenda past introductions. We're going to talk around the landscape of paid ads. It's kind of like the 10,000 foot view of like what is paid ads in terms of Google Ads relate to in terms of other types of digital advertising. What are the preparations that need to be done before really launching an ads account and the timing around when to launch an ads account? We're going to talk through the concept of a quality score. So once you launch an ads account, Google has really three key factors in what they call the quality score and how they rate your advertising as it's ongoing. We're going to review what the things are to review while your campaign's up and running. And then what we see as some really key takeaways and hopefully answer your questions at the end as well. So just on a high level paid ads landscape, I think the two big gorillas in the room that most people know are Google and Facebook. We really draw a line between those two as calling it intent versus demographic. And these screenshots really meant to represent that. If you aren't really intimately familiar with Google Ads, we can parse the intent because you're targeting a keyword. So you're purchasing, really, you're saying you're willing to purchase a query or a set of terms on google.com when someone searches. So it's very easy to parse intent around that user. When we pair that against other paid landscapes, the kind of core opposite is demographic. So this is a screenshot of the back end of the paid platform within Facebook or more social advertising, where you think that our targeting criteria is then things like location, age, gender. And the easiest way to explain about it is everybody uses social media and you're not going on them and searching keywords, but there's a lot of information about you within your profiles. So big difference of intent versus demographic. And we'll come back to this concept at the end when we talk about like, what are your goals with these advertising campaigns? And that may ultimately exclude and say you're not meant to go onto Google. But for the bulk of this webinar, we're going to stick on the left side of this and talking about intent and particularly keyword targeting with Google Ads. just to jump right in so we're all on the same page and what a Google ad is, on the right-hand side, you can take a screenshot that I actually just took from a couple of days ago here in New York as I was sitting in our office, just Googling top orthopedic surgeon, New York City. As you can see, the entire search result is just stacked with ads. And the only distinguishing visual between an ad and the other organic search is that little black text where it says AD, ad. And that means that that person has placed a value on the keyword that I searched and is willing to pay for it if I click on it. The reason why Google is the 800-pound gorilla in the room is it's estimated that 92% of all online search goes through google.com. So there are competitors when we think about Bing, DuckDuckGo has been getting a lot more press recently, but Google is still the 800-pound gorilla in the room. So simply your potential patients are using this platform, and it's where we have to go to connect with them. Another huge data point underneath that is, even though they're the 800-pound gorilla for all digital, the largest subcategory of online search is often tracked as health. It's estimated that 7% of all online search is health-related queries, and that's the largest subcategory. And that category is constantly changing as they estimate over 1 billion searches happen per day. And this is a key question we always get, and we've been in the market over 10 years, is there still opportunity? Everyone sees like the big hospitals, especially where we are in New York, going, well, if I don't have the budget like them, or we don't have the huge staff like them, is this even something we should throw any resources at? And our response always is yes, because the search queries are constantly changing. And I think the last 2 years probably proved that to everyone, is almost every medical specialty is now associated to something and COVID. And that didn't exist before. So there's always opportunity on just how information comes out. There's always opportunity on just how informed potential patients are on what they're searching. Just to walk through the research result a little more on the right-hand side there, you can see there's even a visual difference. And we look at search results really as real estate, like how much visual real estate can you take up? And if you just look at the first search result, they actually have extensions against their ads, and we'll talk about what that means. But that concept of real estate, I'm going to touch a couple of times as we go through this. And that's really held to a search result, not just the ads page. You'll see as we reference reputation throughout, but kind of hold that concept of real estate, as it's really a key visual to think about of how to dominate kind of like the visual space of the search result. I'm going to back up a little bit too, and just now set the tone that if we know there's billions of searches around healthcare, where do they start to land in kind of the intent in the buckets? And this is one of our favorite visuals on our team, and it really hasn't changed in almost a decade. The percentages slightly always adjust, but the core difference of kind of like ratio between them doesn't. And what this visual represents was a white paper that Google put out in 2014, where they analyzed billions of healthcare searches and broke it down into 4 categories. For us, it's really funny when we take over a site or we start a campaign and we look at kind of what's the existing traffic that someone's being found for. It's often falling in the buckets of brand and treatment. What that is the doctor's name, the practice's name, the very clinical name to your surgical approach, or just a clinical name to what you do. But ultimately, the largest categories of healthcare are symptoms and conditions. And that's simply the layman terms that people are searching because they don't know what they have yet, and they certainly don't know who should treat it yet. So when we think about paid ads, we go, that's where the largest landscape and opportunity is starting to decipher and understand the consumer's language around what you do. And the simple concept that we always say is there's way more people that understand the indications to what you do than what you do. So understanding that difference and the opportunity of that scale is a big one.
Hey, Bryan, quick question from me, not the audience. I apologize. That search you showed a couple of slides ago, top orthopedic surgeon in New York City, does that also fall into that branded category, or where is that on this chart?
The top orthopedic would really fall into like a blend between treatments and procedures and then symptoms or departments. Orthopedics is in itself is a department. So it starts to toe the line into the layman category, but it's a good example of kind of a little bit between both, because that user had an intent on location as well. That user being me, but that's a very common term of saying, I just want the best, insert variable specialty, insert variable location.
Yeah, that's kind of what led me to ask the question is they're searching for the treatment, but the result that they want is that branded category, like give me someone to go to. So thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, and there's many stages to a user's intent as they go down the journey. And for us, that top specialty location is a key term to go after, but it's often the most crowded. And that's why I kind of took that screenshot to show there was a hospital in that search result, a large one in New York, and then 2 medical practices. So there's clearly a focus on that, but now this slide's meant to represent the landscape is much, much bigger. And there's a few slides we'll talk about that where we did some really interesting studies to show the difference of the clinical language, like the business of medicine and how they talk about what they do, and then the consumers of medicine and how do they talk about what they're looking for. And these queries on the left are meant to start to kind of prime that, where you look at those searches, yeah, a cardiologist in my area at least knows a specialty, but the bulk of these are often just simple layman things. Like, what am I suffering from during the day? Or what am I being hindered from during the day? I don't know what I'm diagnosed with yet, or I don't know what specialty yet, and I definitely don't know what doctor or what brand yet. And it's really funny is that we often have them starting at that last phase as well. We're promoting our brand and our doctors. And I go, that's great, but there's a lot more people that know what you do than who you are. Now kind of digging into, we've laid out the landscape and hopefully validated to go, okay, Google Ads is the right type for me. Yes, keywords are what I want to go after. I can start to understand maybe those keywords, kind of shift the focus a little and go, well, there's also things that we really encourage or almost require to prepare before launching any kind of paid budget. And the simplest way we think about it is an ads campaign is really just meant to augment or work with other efforts. They're not meant to replace things, specifically reputation and reputation management. Is the way we see it as good reputation is just an indication that helps convert ads better. And this is meant to be as a stark example is using that concept from the slide before. No matter where you're targeting a potential patient in their search journey, the last thing they always do is then look you or your brand up by name. So even if I go to that really layman term and educate that person and go, oh, what you're searching may indicate what we do, you should probably come in and see us, they're still going to then search you. So for us, having no, and especially or a bad reputation actually will dwindle the effect of your advertising dollars and cost you more money. So for us, we really encourage, if you haven't done the work to clean up and establish your reputation, to do it. And it's simply using that real estate concept again, as you look at the search result, and this was just a doctor's name, there's visual cues and indications everywhere. And that's just purchasing habits. It's not even healthcare specific. When you think about us all as consumers, we want to know that we're making the right decision, no matter what decision we're making in life, and especially a sensitive one like healthcare. So how many validations and touch points can we create to confirm and make that person feel comfortable to reach out for care? And one of the numbers we often track for that is we see users go to 4 to 6 different websites for that validation before they reach out from a digital to physical conversion. Another big preparation now is really the core of Google Ads is, okay, even if you're bidding on the term, you're finding the right intent, you have great ad copy, is the primary thing is you got to point them somewhere. That ad's going to a URL, that ad's going to a website. And we want to make sure that we're providing a very kind of guarded and simplified experience to that user. It's a very common thing. I have to kudos, and I think one of our team members on the call that's really educated even us more and more on paring down the simplicity of what the page provides and what call to action you're asking for. And for us, we're constantly tracking what's the information, and even what's the order of the information that that person wants to see before they feel comfortable to submit for more. And using that magnifying glass concept is the largest percentage of search comes in like a care category. So if it's a symptom or condition or department even, so we want to make sure we're answering and validating right away that what they're searching for is something that we potentially do. Then they want to know, where is that care going to be provided, the locations, as long as they're in proximity to where you are. They want to see the potential providers that could be treating that condition or disease state. They want to have that external validation. So if that's testimonials, reviews, and even case studies is something we've recently released even into our system, is they want to see another patient's experience. And we always are trying to kind of push the envelope and what that means, and then not just being validation on like a third-party website review that a lot of our clients and really healthcare in general has a lot of this information. It's like stored often just in op notes, producing case studies around what they experience. And then that call to action, if that's driving for a phone call, driving for a form submission, whatever it is make sure you're constantly testing that there aren't multiple ways to lose this person into other areas of your website, and that you're providing the information that they're looking for. So now kind of really digging in a little bit more now is, once that user clicks that ad, like on the previous screen, they're coming to your website. This visual is a little crude, but it's meant to just really hammer down just the concept of the data flow underneath that user's web session. Is that you want to obviously set up integration between Google Ads and predominantly Google Analytics or whatever web analytics platform you're using. And then you really want to make sure that you have some measure of effect that isn't just like digital data based. It's very common where we see that people are just tracking like clicks, impressions, time on page, page visits. You want to make sure you always have some tracking in place to measure a digital to physical outreach. And the three main ones that we track, and it's pretty much common across the board with healthcare, are phone calls, some kind of form or appointment submission, or some kind of live chat. That each one of those events should trigger a conversion, so then you can really start to understand how are people reaching out to you from your digital ad dollars to physical outreach. Kind of shifting the tone back a bit more, those are all the things that kind of need to be in preparation before you really start to build out the ad campaign. So your reputation in place, a proper landing page with the right information and the call to actions. It's really all the pieces around the puzzle now when you start to open up and actually get into the ads interface. And this is a screenshot from a tool called Google Ads Keyword Planner. And for us, this is such an invaluable tool. There's so many third-party platforms that you can license around keyword research, which are all great tools, but we always say is, why not go to the source? Is Google has the best data on Google. So this database has years and years and years of all, basically the entire world's past search history to show us a prediction of how much volume and even how much potential cost it would be to go after that keyword. So when you go into Google Ads, this is a free tool within the ads account. And we use this really when we're starting with a new ads account, or say maybe we don't have data to kick off. It's a great tool to really think of as like a user intent research. So the first thing we always do is just limit the geography. If you see kind of the box in the upper right-hand corner, I'm in New York. So I just said, I only want to see search data for the New York DMA. We know kind of travel patterns in New York, and we know people's willingness to kind of come into the island of Manhattan. So I only want to see historical data and then forecasted data for the geography that's relevant to my physical location or where your business services patients. When we think about now trying to start to dig in to get access to relevant keywords, volume, and cost, is we use this concept of seed terms, where you think about your specialty, your core procedures, your core symptoms and conditions, and the location that you're in. So just kind of following that logic from the previous screenshot, just put in top orthopedic surgeon, what the data starts to spit out is not only that specific keyword, the average number of searches, and then the potential cost to buy that keyword. It'll start to show me relevant terms and say, hey, is best shoulder surgeon relevant to you? Because there's actually more of those searches each month and at a different cost. And you'll start to kind of pare down to understand there's a lot of variances that you can include or exclude. But we start with really simple, like 3 to 5 seed terms that we call, to start to just get a baseline around cost and traffic, which will start to give you indications even around appropriate budgets, projected forecast around the number of conversions to expect. And that's really the way we start to think about it, from kind of black and white ROI as best we can before even launching the campaign itself.
Hey, Bryan, there are a couple of questions. Can I interrupt you for a moment?
Please.
Okay, so going back to the previous slide, sorry to derail things. What's a good way or kind of expectation to have for tracking calls if you're putting a phone number in front of a patient's face and they're kind of disconnected from, clicking it on the website and they just dial it on their phone? How do you track that? Is it possible to track that as an outcome from your advertising?
Yeah, great question. And I think, because I don't see on my slides, I think I address it in the next one, but I'll hold that if that's okay.
That's fine.
I know I addressed it. I just forget which order it's in.
No problem. The next question was on the slide you were just showing, which is you say to start with, I think 3 to 5 of those seed terms or the keywords to search. Is that an appropriate long-term goal, or should that be maturing to a state where you're looking at dozens or scores? What's an appropriate long-term goal in terms of the number of keywords folks should be targeting?
It's an appropriate goal in terms of an ad group. And this I'll address here, and then I know I definitely address again in a few slides. But the way we think about it is the campaign itself is really tied to a single website. And then underneath the campaign is an ad group. An ad group really is just a theme of what you're going after. That theme should be so tightly focused that you should only have 3 to 5 keywords per ad group. And that's referenced in when I start to dig into quality score. That next kind of trigger point to have another ad group really becomes a financial one. So it's like, how expensive are those terms relative to how much you're willing to spend? If you have more budget than those 5 terms cost, then you find the next theme. So if you think, okay, my specialty is the primary, let's just go after orthopedics. We kind of maxed out the amount of searches around the terms we find relevant. Then I'm going to go after ACL surgery. That then becomes another ad group. You try and stay within 3 to 5 keywords within that ad group as well.
Great, thank you.
This is a good, I'd say, kind of segue to that too, of how do we think about keywords, where if you don't really have a good background or a data set to start from, that previous slide was meant to just be think about the business of you first. What is the medical terminologies that you use, like specialties and your procedures, departments. But this slide is really meant to visualize the stark difference of how the business of healthcare uses language and how the consumers of healthcare use language. And what we mapped here, this was actually an interesting presentation I gave with a head and neck surgeon, was on the right-hand side is the business of healthcare, which I'm sure you can probably guess. It's framed around a procedure called the septal perforation, which is just a hole in your nose. When you look at ICD and CPT coding, which is just the medical taxonomy of diagnosis and billing, there's only 12 variances on the name of the term or basically approved variances on how to indicate it medically. And you just look at the language around it. What we mapped to the web content around this client and ultimately conversions was 1,700 different unique queries. If you just look at the terms within them, they are not medical at all. They're just what were the things that they were suffering from. And this is a really interesting condition because it can be kind of acute induced by your own efforts. So you look at things like cocaine, or it can be something over time as well, like stabbing and infection. So you just see this huge visual difference of the consumer language versus the medical language. And us, this is that crest in that magnifying glass to show that difference of the right-hand side is that kind of brand versus treatment terminology, which is the business of medicine. The left-hand side is those symptoms, conditions, which is the consumers of medicine. And a really fun way is just like ask your patients how they found you. I think people very much think of it as like a source attribution. Well, just, oh, we found you on the internet, or we found you from reputation or social. We push them to ask a little bit more, just have a conversation. Like, what were the things you were searching? What were you suffering from? And your patients are a gold mine to start telling you, because at that first interaction, they're uneducated about what they have medically. They can only explain to you what's in their own head and their own experience. So at the beginning, this starts to answer that question around call tracking. And this is how we kind of think of it in stages. I think I was saying, I know there's a range of crowd on this call. So we kind of broke it out as kind of like beginner, intermediate, and advanced. The visual is meant to represent just highlighting like the core things to track are those digital to physical, like phone calls and appointments and live chat. So the way we think about it from a beginner standpoint is just track a blended event. What that means is you're not uniquely tracking each one. That it's fairly straightforward to pass an event from your website when someone just clicks a phone number or submits a form, where you at least know that action was taken, but you're really not seeing it as a unique action. You're just seeing it as a action. When we think about intermediate, is you can actually start to do that uniquely. One of the primary ways is with call tracking. There's a lot of third-party softwares and integrations around that. That can get really wild with dynamic phone numbers, or even just creating one static phone number that sits on your website. And what happens is then you just know when that phone number is called, that's coming from a digital source. That becomes a little bit more of a better indication than just like a blended conversion that any action was taken. And underneath that, another kind of intermediate, not fully advanced, is you can pass kind of like event IDs. So when a form is submitted, just create an ID around that event happened. Or when a call is submitted, the same thing can happen as well. Really, once we kind of, I'd say, push into the really advanced level, is GCLID, is Google Ads unique ID, that you can actually pass an ID from Google Ads into like a third-party CRM, or really anywhere that you can store data, that at some point you can actually go and match back that conversion. In the advertising world, it's called offline conversions. So you can validate, because we're not in the e-commerce world. So you think like we're not selling socks, or there's this dollars and cents transaction at the moment of conversion. There's always a time delay. So you can actually then pass data back into Google Ads and say, hey, that lead that came 30 days ago, yeah, they were clinically relevant, they were insurance relevant, whatever it is. And using that GCLID, pass back to the ad platform and say, that's not just a lead anymore, it's an actual conversion. And I just went through probably 10 years of a slew of beginner to advanced. So the comment I always say too is we've been in the ad space really since it was nascent. Is when it started and it was really unique, it was very, very easy probably to manage yourself. The keywords were very cheap, like pennies per click. So the ROI on it was just like, it almost wasn't required to have this insane analysis. But over 12 plus years, competition has grown drastically to just advertising dollars moving online. So a lot more educated businesses within the healthcare space, that it really becomes something that it's like preaching to a barber, but that you need someone intently looking at, and it can't just be turned on passively and left alone. Kind of the takeaways that I think, and then hopefully we can get a few minutes to Q&A. And I know I'm running right up to 12:30, so I appreciate everyone that's hung out with us.
And by the way, we will share the recording afterwards. So if folks do have to leave right at the bottom of the hour here, you'll still get the benefit of seeing this wrap up. But go ahead, Bryan.
Yeah, this is kind of back to that first slide when we talked about intent versus demographic, is define your goal. And I have to kudos to our team at Boaz, is our paid ad specialists who helped me a lot with this information and slide, is that visual on the right is really, is conversion your immediate and measurable goal out of this? Then more than likely Google Ads is probably the best platform to start on. We often will kind of dig into that, and you'll find out maybe it's brand awareness, maybe it's promotion of an event, maybe it's a new location you've offered or a new service line that you just want to get out to the population. Then that's probably not Google Ads, where you're more targeting a demographic. So you may want to look at that kind of discovering phase of what we consider the search funnel, and that could be an appropriate different ad platform. So really push yourself to understand, to define the intention and the goal around where and why you want to spend this money. Reinforcing reputation. I mean, it's everything and everywhere in life. And the funny anecdote I always use, like, I'll be in a store buying a t-shirt, and what's the thing I do? I look up on my phone, reviews on it, prices on it. I'm making 4 or 5 touch points on something that's kind of as low cost as an article of clothing. Healthcare is that much more complex and sensitive, as people want to see and validate a decision before they're ever going to physically reach out to you. So make sure your reputation is in many places and touch points as possible. This one really digs into the finances. Is just understand your revenue. It is a financial conversation when you start to put ad dollars onto platforms, and specifically Google. Is even if it's just a blended amount, understand if you're going after a particular patient type or procedure that you're promoting. Just understand your revenue from if it's a one-time or even a lifetime revenue, what that patient looks like when they come into your practice. That's really going to inform then your cost per acquisitions, your willingness to spend, and even just on a target number, not a literal sense of each interaction. Another big one is use the free resource of the Google Keyword Planner. Go to the source with their data. It's wild the amount of information they're willing to give really to the public, and you get this crazy access to intent and see how people consume and search for healthcare data. And then only run ads to a pointed landing page. It's a very common mistake. We see that people will have all this great keyword and ad copy and all these ad groups, and then everything's pointing to the homepage. And that's really breaking kind of the customer journey. Is they're looking for like a condition or a symptom, and then you hit them in the face with your brand, and you just point them to the homepage, and then you're just losing people's intention there. And then on the post-launch side is always have some measure of tracking of physical event. Don't just rely on anything like traffic and impressions and clicks and page speed and page loads and page visits. There's got to be some tracking of an event. And then test. I mean, it's the biggest thing we're always doing is people's habits. Keywords are constantly changing. So don't set it and forget it. I say thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rater8. Thank you to everyone. And I hope there's a few questions.
Yeah, well, in the interest of time, I'm just going to ask one, because it's the one question I'm seeing a few different variations basically asking the same thing, which is how much should people be spending on this stuff? So one in particular says, for one location in a mid-sized market, what should we invest? But maybe you can speak to how that might change with the scale of the business as well. But people want to know how much to spend.
Yeah, it's the almighty question. I mean, the real answer is client specific. I mean, if you're a primary care practice and you're doing high volume and you're just doing annual visits, or you're a head and neck surgeon, the finances of your business are very different. But we often will use as a baseline when you're a single doctor, single location, really to like dip your toe into the water. We really look at around $1,500 a month as an ad budget to really make sure you're getting access to enough data for the ads platform to be smart enough to go after your user. That number starts to go up when we look at then if you're in a practice that's a bit more brand focused. So we start to then see that trigger point on once you have, say, more than one location, or you break into, say, like the 5-7+ provider as a brand, because there's even an aspect of that budget that could be applied to like brand defense. Your number starts to go maybe in the 6,000 to 8,000 range. Then the sky's the limit. It's really become a pay to play world in the digital landscape. is they're testing even areas around Google My Business becoming paid, and they're inserting ads into Google My Business landscapes. Is they're a for-profit company and they're just trying to squeeze everywhere they can. So the biggest thing is track. I mean, that's the beauty around it, is that every minutia around to the penny is trackable. So as long as you have at least an understanding of your own business's finances and kind of the potential revenue generated, there's still massive opportunity. I mean, we started 10 years ago as a single doctor specialty agency and have only grown up that scale and still work in those kind of multi-location, multi-doctor. And we wouldn't exist if that opportunity wasn't there.
That's great. Well, again, and obviously we've run a little bit over, so I'm going to cut the Q&A short, and glad I got to squeeze a few in along the way. But Bryan, thank you. That was awesome. I hope our audience found it valuable as well. And we definitely appreciate everyone joining us today.